Chinese group that from 6 different provinces that is next to the that which located on southeast China. Sorry, I have to go back again. So so those 6 companies not only orchestrate the life of Chinese, they also help them find job. They built school. They built temples. They were actually the person who actually controlled Chinatown at the time. So as a picture, this is actually pretty well known. This is the picture that the few Chinese that actually laid the last piece of the railroad. Those are the officers of the 6 companies. And this is the actual first school in Chinatown at the time. So with the Congress passed the Burlingame Act in 1868, as a result, the Chinese was, at the time, it was a treaty that China signed with the U.S., which allowed both sides of its citizens to travel freely into each countries. And because of that, the population is dramatically increased. So Chinatown was expanded from a small neighborhood of a couple blocks into a 12-block district. But then the poverty, discrimination, and a cultural difference really limit the Chinese to meet west of the city. So as a result, Chinatown actually developed its own entertainment center and turned some of the street into a red light district. So their favorite things to do is like a drama house, prostitution, gambling hall, and opium den at the time. And because a lot of times the Chinese who work in the U.S. was single, it's bachelor, so the prostitutes was really demanding and really profitable, and they were controlled by at the time, the men's and women ratio is 1 woman in every 20 men. So therefore, at the time, the mafia of the Chinatown is called towns. They will force whoever young woman in Chinatown to work as a prostitute, and soon, to meet the demand, they have more and more. They actually hire slave trader to kidnap or buy those women overseas to work as a prostitution. This is actually one of the favorite map I found. You see all the colors. Each color represents each different things. So the orange is considered Chinese occupancy. The pink was the Chinese gambling house. The green was actually Chinese prostitute. The red was the Chinese temple. The blue was actually the white prostitution. So this is a map of Chinatown at the time. So you see DuPont Street, which is a grand, and you see Jackson, and this is actually one of the things I learned. So this is how it looks like. You can see how many, actually most hardly see a woman inside this picture. This is a picture of the how the opium den was operated, and a picture, a scratch to showing how the gambling was operated at the time, and some pictures of the sex slave that was running in Chinatown at the time. So as the completion of Transcontinental Railroad in May 1869, and soon was followed by the economic recession in 1870. Those 2 events actually raised the hatred between the Chinese and the public, the majority of people in San Francisco. And because the finish of the Transcontinental Railroad, a lot of Chinese labor was actually released, and most of them didn't know any better, so they actually poured into San Francisco. As the population of Chinese increased, and at the time the job wasn't that much because during economic recession, a lot of white people and the society was really worried that the Chinese will take job from other people. They will, because they have a history of willing to take and work for any kind of work that can survive. And therefore, a lot of unions and a lot of our anti-Chinese group would jump in and actually to protect their right. So eventually, those caught the attention of the state and the San Francisco city official.
I wasn't thinking.
Sorry? Okay. Anyway, so at the time, a lot of Chinese business owner, they can afford car, they can afford horse or car. So what they use a shoulder pole and a basket to carry their goods, such as and the laundry, and deliver throughout the town. And because of that, in 1870, the San Francisco had a new law. It's called the Sidewalk Ordinance. The ordinance was limited Chinese to sell and deliver their goods with their shoulder poles and a basket. And then later, and they see the law itself wasn't really helpful. So later, in 1871, the city passed another law called the Cubic Ordinance Act. So the Cubic Ordinance Act was to require all the Chinese boarding house to have at least 500 cubic feet of air, which Dr. Eli talked about that last time, and which is impossible because the poverty of Chinese, they live like really crowded in a small house. There's no way they have 500 cubic feet of air. And then later, because it wasn't really useful either, a lot of people rather go to jail than paying the fine. So eventually, the city introduced another law. It's called, introduced by the Board of Supervisor. It launched a ordinance called the Q Ordinance in 1876. As you know, at the time, a lot of Chinese hairstyle was a long pigtail. The ordinance was given the power to the sheriff to cut off the pigtail, long braided hair of the Chinese men. At that time, the pigtail is really important symbolic significance to a Chinese, because that was how all the men was having the same hairstyle as their identity. The reason why is because Chinese will refuse to pay the fine. Therefore, they use this to threatening them, say, if you don't follow, I got to cut off your hair and lose your identity and their dignity eventually. So here's a couple picture. This is what I talk about, the shoulder pole and the basket. They used to carry this around in the city to sell their goods. Some people used there to deliver the laundries to their customer throughout the San Francisco. And this is actually a newspaper front line about the Cubic Air Ordinance. You see how they actually picture how Chinese live. So eventually, the law itself is really quite discriminated. It pretty much is just target the right group, one single ethnicity. I have a little video to show you about how Chinese was. State through a legislative department consider the presence of foreigner of different ways in this country, who will not assimilate with us to be dangerous to its peace and security. Their exclusion is not to be stayed because the time are not actual hostility with the nation which foreigners are subjected. This is actually